Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And thanks to Yale for helping to organize this panel with publishing panel on science with Springer Nature. I thought we'd all introduce ourselves and then we can get to the questions. We should. Sorry about that. Can you see my screen? No, okay. I will share that in a minute. So quickly, I just wanted to give a bit of history about Springer Nature. Springer was founded in 1842 and merged with Nature in 2015. We're one of the largest research publishers in the world with 13,000 employees in 15 countries. We publish the book of researchers, professors, practitioners around the world, and our Springer Link platform holds over 10 million scientific documents. We publish books in both print and including textbooks and major reference works, journals, magazines, video, and databases that span topics throughout STEM. And just a bit about me before the others introduce themselves. I'm a senior editor at Springer in New York, and I've been with the company since 2014. I personally publish books and previously journals, primarily on communications engineering and signal processing. Previously, I was an acquisitions editor with Wiley and with Elsevier, working on computer science books. I don't have a science background. I studied political science with no real plan, except I wanted to work with books or journalism. I got a job for Elsevier, starting as an assistant editor, managing a book list on artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction. And since then, I've kind of gotten in this computer science engineering niche. I don't really need to know the science behind it. You just need to know the right people to write the books and the right topics to pursue. So we do that by going to conferences, by doing research, doing campus visits, word of mouth, working with series editors who help locate people as well. So that's a bit about me. I can answer more questions later, but now on to our esteemed panel. We have a diverse group here of editors and authors from magazines, books, and journals at Springer Nature. So I'm going to share my screen, and then, whoops, you're probably seeing the wrong one. Sorry about that.
We're not seeing anything.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Oh, okay. Then I'll stop doing that. Actually, why don't you start introducing yourselves and I will get my screen to work. Do you want to start with Mohamed?
Yes, sure. I'm happy to do that. So my name is Mohamed Yahya. I've been working with in magazines. So I started with Nature. I'm an executive editor for the Middle East and Africa. So primarily what that means is I focus on the science journalism part of what we do, which is for people who read Nature and are familiar with it, is basically the front half of Nature. So it's not where the original research is published, but it's where the science news and features and commentary all go. So I joined Nature in 2010 as the launch editor for Nature Middle East, which is a regional portal that focused on the Middle East. Now I work with several publications. They're, like I said, they're all science journalism, all focused on the front half of Nature, which range from Nature Middle East to Nature Italy to an Arabic version of the Scientific American, which is also one of the publications produced by Springer Nature. I come from a science background. I graduated from pharmacy originally, and yeah, that was a bit of time ago now. I'm not as young as I used to be, but I remember when I was exactly where many of the attendees here are, exactly where I graduated and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and tried so many different things, from community pharmacies to teaching and a bit of research, before I hit science journalism and realized that's exactly what I wanted to be doing for long term. So yeah, that's where I am right now, and I hope that this, I mean, I hope I can share this experience with anyone here if they have any questions and that you find it useful.
Great. Thank you, Mohammed. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Okay. Probably don't need that thing there. Okay, Swati.
Okay, thanks. So I am Swati Merushi. I'm the editorial director currently of Engineering and Applied Sciences books, focused on the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa regions. And I have been with Springer since 2013. And before that, I used to publish engineering textbooks for Cengage Learning in the US. And before that, I used to work for Oxford University Press, also in India. So I got into publishing quite by accident. I have a degree in physics and then a master's in philosophy, focused on primarily on logic, on multi-valued logic. And I was supposed to be getting a second master's from Singapore in semiconductor technology. And during the summer break, before I went for my second master's, I somehow ended up with a job at Oxford University Press. I thought I would do it for the summer and then leave. I was an assistant editor for engineering textbooks. And then I never left. I could defer my master's program admission year on year for 5 years. And I did that. After the 5th year, Nanyang Technical University, or NTU, where I was supposed to go, actually asked me if I wanted to defer, and they would let me defer for another couple of years. And by then, I was like, I don't think I'm going back to school, and I'm definitely not going to start a new career in semiconductor fabrication. And so that's what we do. As Mary said, a scientific background is not essential for what we do. And a lot of my colleagues, current and past, and some of the most successful editors in the publishing industry that I've known are actually not graduates in any sort of sciences. So Mary being an example, it's just about learning about the field that you want to be publishing in and familiarizing yourself with the hot trends, which we do by going to conferences and to campuses. I am not an engineer, but if you ask me questions about what's going on in physics now, I probably won't be able to answer them. But if you ask me about what's on trend in every kind of engineering in different disciplines, I probably would be able to tell you, because that's the community I work with most closely now. And in addition to my day job, which is publishing books, and previously it was also publishing journals until early last year, I also engage in some, things that I am very fond of, also related to engineering. So one of the topics that I really like working on is women in engineering and STM. And Jill was recently at a webinar we did on that as well. So I do a lot of events, and I'm happy to mentor, especially young women who are interested in careers in science and engineering. And I also am very involved with the societies that look at betterment of engineering education, improvement in engineering education. So these are some of the things that I really care about and work on besides the day job that I do. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Swati. Jill?
I'm Jill Tija. I'm in Colorado, from our part of the world. Good morning. I graduated with a degree in applied math and electrical engineering and went to work in the electric utility industry as an electrical engineer. I actually, for more than 40 years, have helped plan power plants, doing what is called in the industry integrated resource planning. I also served as an expert witness for well over 30 years before state and federal regulatory commissions. At the same time, I became very active in the Society of Women Engineers. I was national president in 1991, 1992, and began researching historical women in science, technology, engineering, and math, and I've been writing all along, but I began writing on that topic as well and nominating women for awards. And I wrote encyclopedia articles on energy, and that's actually how Springer found me, through one of the encyclopedia articles that I wrote, and asked me if I wanted to write a book on distributed energy, which is a topic within the electric utility industry And I actually, during our conversation, said no, but I've done this work on historical women in the STEM fields. I actually have a book that was published in 2000 and it needs to be updated and revised. And if you're interested in that, then we could talk. And so we did. And they ended up saying, we're going to do this series on, it's going to be the Springer Women in Engineering and Science series. And we want you to be series editor. And so as of this point in time, 11 books have been published in the series for Springer. 8 more are under contract. I'm probably in discussions for about 10 more at this point in time. And so what I have done, I've been in the utility industry for 44 years now. And I say pretty much, I'm not retired because I'm never going to retire, but I sit on 2 corporate boards. But mostly what I do is I write books. And I write books mostly about either engineering or women. And so I'm writing women back into history around the world. And I'm working on 3 books in that area right now. Be happy to answer questions later.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned you've done a lot of magazine articles, though you're not in the magazine industry.
I've done many magazine articles as well. Newspaper, magazine, I've done a lot of writing.
Okay. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks,
Natalie?
Hello, my name is Natalie Jacobs. I'm based in Dordrecht in the Netherlands, and I've been with Springer Nature since the year 2000. So that's, a bit more than 20 years now. I studied Spanish, so I don't have a real science degree either. But as Mary and Swati already mentioned, you don't really need a real science degree to be able to do what we are doing. I started as an associate editor, then I became an editor, a senior editor, and now I'm an executive editor. So even without a science degree, you can grow within a company like Springer Nature. I started back in 2000 at Kluwer Academic Publishers, and Kluwer Academic Publishers merged with Springer back in 2004, and now in 2015, as Mary mentioned, we merged with Nature. I used to be responsible for both books and journals, but since last year, I'm now only doing journals. And I'm very proud to be responsible for one of our flagship journals right now, SN Applied Sciences. And Amin is one of the managing editors for SN Applied Sciences. He will tell you more about that journal later. I'm happy to be here and to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you. And Amin. Oh, we can't hear you. Been having technical difficulties this morning, and Yael, I know is.
You hearing me now or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulty. I was talking for a few seconds. I am Amin Fatemi. Actually, I joined the Springer Nature as the company 2.5 years now. It was midsummer 2018 that I joined Springer Nature along with a few colleagues of mine that are now my good friends as well. And we try to work on the journal, the big journal, broad scope journal, as Natalie mentioned, SN Applied Sciences. The title of my job is managing editor of engineering for the journal. I can say this much: it has been a really good time that I had with the company. It has been adventurous. It has been really fun. Very good colleagues from different disciplines. We have from fields of philosophy to economics to medicine doctors to engineers like myself, physicists, chemists. We can pick brains in the office. It's been really fun time that we had with each other the past few years. Prior to that, a little bit about my background and my education. I did my bachelor and master's in my home country in Iran in computer science and petroleum engineering. After I finished my master's in petroleum engineering hydrocarbon reservoirs, I worked for a few years in the oil and gas industry in the Middle East. Then I had the ambition of always pursuing to the top of my field of education, and I decided to pursue a PhD, applied to a couple of universities, and finally got admission from TU Delft and Delft University of Technology, a small, cute town in the Netherlands, which I still live. And that's where I'm talking to you from, in Delft. Then, in a very dramatic shift of events from the petroleum world, I decided to pursue a career in IT. I was a software developer / data scientist for a couple of years in the Netherlands, until one night that I just had an offer from a company to join them, to continue my career in IT. I received a message from somebody that found me on LinkedIn, and apparently my background, education, and my multidisciplinary approach in science was kind of matching an opening in the company for this journal. So they sent me a message, and at first I was a little bit not sure what this message is about, because as a software developer, you get a lot of invitations to talk to companies, a lot of recruiters talk to you, send your messages left and right, find your email from, I don't know what research they come up with, your personal email to invite you to different events. But this one was different. So although I had an offer on the table from a company, I decided to give it a try. I knew kind of what the publisher and what an editor does, but I had never thought about it as a serious career path. So I looked into it, and the more I studied it and read the job description and responsibilities, I realized I've been once an author. I've written several journal articles as an engineer. Then I've refereed multiple articles as well throughout my career, almost twice as much the number of articles I've published. I've given back to the community as a referee, as a reviewer. And it could be a good opportunity to see on the other side of things, which is also being an editor, and look from the other side, the person that decides which scientific articles is sound enough to be published and reach out to the scientific community and to the public. So I sat down with Natalie and other colleagues at the time were in the recruitment process. We had very fruitful discussions, and I was really motivated, and I saw the motivation in them to also consider the position serious. And after one thing led to the other, I had another dramatic shift of events to come from the IT world to the editorial world and join Springer Nature as one of the bigger publishing, if not the biggest publishing house in the world. Just to put it in a nutshell, it has been a very fun ride. I've learned a lot. We have recently been given very good news about the progress of the journal, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the transition as a academic scientist / researcher to the IT, or after that, why I decided to leave IT world, software development world, to become an editor, the pros, and if there are cons, if any. So I would be happy to answer questions. So that would be it.
Great, thank you, Amin. I think that we are ready for the questions now. I know Yael might be having some trouble trying to connect her to audio. Has it worked, Yael?
Yes, my audio appears to be working. I apologize. My webcam is having some difficulties, but we can do everything via audio.
Yes.
Great. So thank you guys so much for introducing yourselves. You all have really interesting backgrounds that I'd love to delve into. I did some earlier preliminary survey of the attendees and kind of what they're interested in learning about and hearing from you guys. So I have a list of questions that I'm going to just run down. Feel free to chime in as you please. Please, everyone, answer if you'd like to. We just really love to hear your input. So the first question that we have is, I know a few of you have touched upon this in your introductions, but the first question is, how did you arrive at this point in your career, and what specifically influenced you to join your field? I know that a few of you said you have scientific backgrounds. What was the factor that really convinced you to stay in science publishing instead of pursuing more scientific endeavors? And did you always know that you wanted to be in publishing?
Can I go ahead and
Yes,
answer
please.
this? Okay, so firstly, no, I never knew I wanted to be in publishing. When I was a child and I was learning German, I must have been like 10 or 11 years old when I started learning German in school. I used to have some books from Springer that were in part of the library of the Goethe Institute, where we went to study sometimes. And I used to look at the logo and think I like Springer Verlag. Verlag, basically Verlagshaus means a publishing house in German. And someday I would like to work for Springer. And that was probably the only thought I ever had as a child of getting into scientific publishing. And as I already told you in my introduction, I did get into it quite by accident. I had a summer of 3 months before I went to school again, and I just got called through some friends to go to Oxford University Press's Delhi offices and take a copy editing test. So they needed some help in freelance copy editing. And the next thing I knew, I landed a permanent job at OUP. So it was quite by accident. And what made me stay in this field is that once I started working in it, I saw the difference that we could make in improving the quality of first textbooks that we were working on and course materials, and also engaging with academia. And another thought I once had as a child when I was a little bit older, maybe a teenager, was that it would be so nice to get a job where you had one foot in the corporate and one in the corporate world and one foot in academia. So as they say, be careful what you wish for, you might just get it. So I did get both. I got the job with one foot in the corporate world and one foot in academia. I mean, still the highlight of my working life is the interactions with academics and professors and the campus visits. No offense to Northeastern, but Penn State remains one of my favorite campuses.
It's because you haven't been to the University of Virginia yet.
Oh, I have. Chill. So, and yeah, so just to give you a view of what we got to do and what I have been doing for these years. So I know I'm not an American. I didn't really live in the US for a long time, or not even at all. I used to travel back and forth. But I have been to 37 states in the United States and over 120 top engineering schools and campuses. So that just gives you a view of what you get to see and the kind of people you get to talk to. So that's what made me stay, the ability to make a difference and to interact with some of the brightest minds in the world.
Yeah,
so yeah,
I would agree
with
that. Yeah, I got in not knowing much about publishing at all. I've taken a couple classes on it just so I'd have my foot in the door. But I really wanted to work in fiction or a topic that I could relate to, or but once I got into academic publishing, I just loved it. I loved the travel. I loved talking to the scientists. I had to travel all over the world to conferences, and I think that just once I had a few years in it, I didn't want to do anything else. And I'd had other jobs before publishing in marketing and in writing little ads and stuff for other industries, and nothing felt right until I got into publishing. So it made a good choice.
If I may, I can only repeat what Mary James is saying. I mean, as I told you before, I studied Spanish, and I'm now using my Spanish to give author workshops, actually, at Spanish universities and at universities in South America. So I'm still using my Spanish, a language that I really love, and I'm able to explain people on how to publish their article, or how to publish in a journal, or how to publish a book. And this is really nice as well. So Yeah, and I think once you are in publishing, you won't leave anymore. Really nice. It's really nice.
I think I can add a bit to my experience. So when like I said, when I graduated, I dabbled with many different things. I had no idea that science journalism existed at that point. I had no idea about it. We didn't have any majors here in Egypt that focused on science journalism until I found this job ad for something that for science journalism, and it sounded like something fun. I mean, it's science, which I liked, and writing, which I also liked, and I thought that's something I'd like to try. I was trying different things, and I absolutely loved it. And I think one of the reasons that made me stay in this and that I feel very passionate about, and it's something, to be honest, that I think is on my mind daily, is that I believe through this that the work we do is actually, of course, of good. To be able to increase science knowledge and access to science to people, to ranging from the science community to the average person on the street, I think there's value in that. I think it's a way to do good, to actually bring positive change to the world. And that might sound like a really grand, but I like the idea that I might be playing that small, tiny part in that. So that keeps me going a lot. And to be honest, the other thing that I really enjoy, and it's a bit different from when I was doing research, is that every time I'm working on a different story, I become an expert in that field, right? So I read so much about it. I get papers, I read them, I talk to amazing experts who work in that. And then for that period of time, I learn so much about this thing. But then I move on to something new, and it keeps getting exciting because I'm learning all these different things, which for me was something I really enjoy. I still enjoy it rather than having to be in one specific field. I really enjoy that freedom of being able to cover everything from, I don't know, climate change to material science, for example.
Great, thank you. We move on to the next question.
Sure. So how often, I know some of you touched on this as well, but how often do people move into the field of scientific journalism and publishing from research? And what does that process really look like?
Well, I know that we have quite a few editors in our team, in the engineering team, that have PhDs and have moved on into an editorial position in publishing. I don't know about how many have gone into journalism, but they have transferred into publishing book and journal articles. So it's still a move into publishing, but in terms of research to magazines, I'm not quite sure.
Right. Okay. Well,
I think I quickly comment just very, very briefly on that, because I'm currently the past president of the World Federation of Science Journalists, and one of the questions we dabble with a lot is that should a science journalist have a science background or a journalism background? And I've seen people come from both, really. I mean, I don't think there's a preference. It's really about the passion for it. I find that my science background helps a lot. For me, at least, it's at least when I'm talking to scientists, I know a little bit more, which helps me with the questions I ask. But on the other hand, another argument which I think is very interesting is that if you go in knowing very little, you ask the right questions. You ask the questions that people really want to know, which I think is a very valid argument. To answer that question, I've seen a lot of people move from research into science journalism. It's a feasible field, and I think also depending on where you are, if you are in the global south, I think there's a lot of potential because there aren't that many science journalists in the global south. So there's still a lot of needs, which is a bit different if you compare it to the West.
Great. Then what advice would you have for someone who's looking to get started in a career in science writing, journalism, or publishing?
Jill, since you've done a lot of articles for magazines, even though you're not in the actual field, was there a way that you started getting your articles published?
I'm just trying to think back. It's been so long ago, but when you write about something that you're passionate about and that you're viewed as an expert in, then you have the opportunity to get published. And what I've actually also learned is that although most of us think that other people have talents just like what we have, that's actually not true. And so we all have expertise and we all have capabilities. And when we actually pursue those interests and capabilities that are natural to us, then we have the opportunity to express ourselves. So what I'm really saying is if you have a scientific or a journalistic interest, not everybody else can write. Not everybody else can write about scientific topics. Not everybody else can write about engineering topics. And let me go another point that just occurred to me. I mean, when I was early in my engineering career, one of the things that I was asked to do was something called being a technical briefer. And what that actually was when the vice president of engineering would do a briefing after a simulated nuclear power plant accident, a simulated accident. My job was to tell the press what the vice president of engineering had just said in English so that the reporters could actually write the story. And so people that are in scientific or science journalism have the ability generally to take those scientific concepts and explain them in a way that the public can understand. And so I think that that actually is a talent that I have, and that's been useful in terms of enabling people to understand the science and the engineering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I would just like to add something to what Jill said. As a forever aspiring writer who has not started writing yet, I would recommend that if you want to write, start writing. Don't worry about getting published. Now you have so many platforms which people did not like 20 years ago. Just start writing articles and posting them on LinkedIn, and just get started with what you want to do, and the career and the publishing will find you, and make connections with people who are working in similar fields. That's the easiest way to get recognized in the field. As for working in publishing is a very multifaceted role when you work with a scientific publisher, either on the science writing side or as a publishing editor. I remember there was a time when I was talking to a contact at a big corporation at a conference. This was about 10 years ago. And he asked me, "So, what function do you work in your company?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I mean, you must work in something, right? Finance, legal, sales, marketing, something." I was like, "I work in editorial, and that's all of that." So working as a publishing editor is a very multifaceted role. You get to learn a lot about everything. And there are a lot of, especially in large organizations like Springer Nature, there are lots of opportunities to learn and expand. And if you join in as an editor for a journal's program like Amin did, and then you decide that no, I would rather be a science journalist, there is opportunity to move around in different, or if you decide that, oh no, I would rather go back to, if Amin decided I would rather go back to IT, there is a huge IT team in the back end that he can still move into, right? So there is a lot of opportunity to what you can do. So my advice is keep your options open.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's
And
very
we also
engaging.
there's a STM is a STEM publishing organization, and they have mentor programs. And I've been mentoring a couple of people who are looking to get into publishing in different roles. So maybe you've already on the right path being part of this magazine, but maybe doing something like that, talking to people like us that have taken certain directions. And I think that this program teams the mentees up with mentors that maybe they align in some way on what the goal of the mentee. So things like that. I think a lot of networking, getting involved in groups. I joined a lot of publishing societies when I was first looking into it. Took a couple classes, just kind of trying to talk to people, maybe looking through like alumni lists to see what fields people went into. And I did that when I was also first thinking about publishing. I talked to someone who had gone to my university who is now working at it wasn't a STEM publisher, but just they told me a bit about their path and what they did. So that was really helpful. And it's a good networking tool also.
Great. So then, if you'd like to add
very quickly, I just strongly second the point that Swati said about just get writing. And the really good thing right now is that so many of the barriers that there were in the past has been removed, because you can just set up your own blog right now, right? So if you like to write about a certain topic in science, you can do that now. And that's really useful because it helps you build up a portfolio that you can then show editors. Because I mean, if you want to start writing articles for a place like Nature, for example, the editors would expect that you have a level of experience. And a lot of young people that I talk to, they say they don't know how to get that experience. But right now, you can just go ahead, build up your own blog, be part of a community that can comment on that blog and your writing and improve it. And then you have something to show a potential editor in the future. And some of the best science journalists that I know right now actually started this way. They started with their own blogs, and now they're writing for some of the biggest magazines in the world, really.
So, what would you say that you do on a daily basis for work? If you're doing, like Swati said, a lot of different things, wearing a lot of hats, what would you say your day-to-day work looks like?
A lot of email.
Emails.
I think it's probably different for each of us with the different journals. Is much different than books, is much different than magazines. But I have dozens and dozens of projects that I'm pursuing, that I'm managing, that are in the contracts have been signed and they're being written. There's books that are in production, then the publication, and so there's kind of a system a process that they all go through. So you kind of have to be the overseer as an acquisitions editor of all of those things. But then there's other people that are helping with the day-to-day. But my job primarily is finding authors, or authors find me, and working with them on the proposal and getting those contracts signed. So that's my biggest kind of role. And then the rest of it is just juggling a lot of things to make sure books actually get published and that the authors are happy. Plus the travel hasn't been happening this year, but normally there would be several conferences or campus visits throughout the year as well. So.
Yeah, I'm sure this is very different than all other years.
Yeah. Yes.
If I may add about my experience as well. Well, I'm the editor of a section of a journal. What we do on a day-to-day basis, as Mary said, it could be really different in the books team, journals team, even in the magazines, and also even in one journal team, it could be different from one person to the other. But in particular about myself, part of our work is dealing with science, of course. Having a scientific background, we deal with handling the articles that authors, scientists submit from around the world, inviting reviewers, have the work evaluated, among other scientists around the world, and just coming up with a decision about the article to go as an acceptance or rejecting the article or sending it for another round of revision. So it's mainly that. In addition, we also go to conferences, shake people's hands, communicate with others, invite authors, invite them to write review articles for us. So it's a little bit of everything, in the sense that you are connected still with science, but you're not on the research side of things as to produce science for the community, but rather read the science that others produce. You keep your knowledge up to date as you study those and deal with those, and ask the opinion of those who are really experts and up to date and follow the state of the art in that particular field of science to come up with a final decision about what should happen with that particular article. And that's, I think, a really beautiful aspect of the life. Yet we followed a path of science. We became an expert a few years ago, a long time ago maybe, but overall, over time, we understand the basis of how to evaluate the scientific work. We understand what the backbone of the work is. We should adhere to some rules and some scientific content and merit to it, so that it can actually be published and reach anybody interested in the world. So that's what we do on a daily basis, and as a managing editor of a big mega journal, actually.
Mohamed, would you want to address that, since there were a lot of questions about magazine?
Yes, sure. So I'm on the editorial side, and I think right now a lot of my work involves management, but really when I'm working with journalists, I think of the journalist-editor relationship. I think of that as a very special kind of relationship, and it's special because there's a mentorship angle to it, and there needs to be a strong trust element to it. So whenever someone writes an article, it's very hard to see it edited, right? So it can be frustrating to see your work change substantially. So that's where this level of trust comes in, and I think as an editor, what I really like to do, and in my relationship with journalists, is that make sure that that we are, it's clear for them and for me that we are on the same side, we're in the same team, and ultimately we want this to look the best it can be, and we have certain standards that we would adhere to as a major science publisher. And at the same time, I really appreciate journalists who use that opportunity to actually improve their work and improve the next copy I would get from them on a new story. So the editing that goes into that really involves really making that text read well, because I mean, once someone writes a story, they're so invested in it, there comes a point where there's really nothing more that they can do. We just need to push it out to an editor, have that trust, and have them be able to work with you and take that next step to move it on further beyond what you can do. So that new pair of eyes, it's always very useful, and that's why we often have several levels of editing really that goes into a story, because we really want to try to catch everything, but also ask the right questions, make sure that this reads correctly, that we're not missing what people would be wanting to know out of that story. So I really think that a large part of what goes into that is having this dynamic relationship between the editor and as journalists, and making sure that relationship is a positive one for both of them, where everyone is getting something out of it, something positive out of it.
Right. So then I have kind of a follow-up question. So do you ever deal with work that is not within your scope of expertise, or something that you've never encountered before? And if so, how do you prepare yourself to be knowledgeable enough or have the tools to edit and publish such work?
I think we already answered that question, that it doesn't have to be in our area of expertise. Like Amin is not an expert in all of engineering. I am an expert in none of engineering. But it's more about relying on experts. If we are
Yeah.
talking about scientific expertise, it's about relying on experts to give you the right advice. And a lot of what we do, again, to link back up to the last question, a lot of what we do is make sure that we have the right connections and networks of experts who can validate the work that we are publishing, because we are not experts. Some of our colleagues like Amin are PhDs in certain areas, but again, they're not experts in everything. So it's not easy for them to evaluate everything that comes to them, but they need to rely on a set of experts, and they need to
Yeah.
make sure that that network of experts is beyond reproach. That's
Yeah.
what we work with.
Yeah, we have a
Right.
lot of peer reviewers. Everything goes through a peer review. So that's where the technical expertise comes from. If even if I were an expert in what I'm publishing, it would still go through a peer review just to validate. And I know journals, it's a pretty rigorous process for the peer review. I'm not sure with magazines, but we make sure it's all scientifically sound.
Great. So then what's
Oh, no, I was just going to say with that because magazines, we don't have actual peer review process, but what we do is we do work a lot with experts. I mean, for any story that I'm working, I mean, I have a medical background, but I have covered physics, and a lot of it sometimes when I start the story, I have absolutely no idea what I'm covering, to be completely honest. But besides doing a lot of reading and researching for that story, I also have a strong network of researchers who I know I can trust, who I know I can turn to. And something that I would add that's very important is that, and that's a problem that I had when I was starting, but then I realized that it's silly, is that sometimes it's scary to ask stupid questions. And a lot of my questions in fields I don't know are stupid questions, but I find it's absolutely fine. I mean, I'll ask. I'm not expected to be an expert in every single field. So just have that confidence and be comfortable asking questions, no matter how stupid they might sound. I think whoever is on the other side, that expert, they'd appreciate you actually taking the time to learn about their fields, and they'd answer. And like I said, no question is too stupid, because if I don't know it, then probably my readers would be interested in that kind of question as well. So yeah, I mean, just my advice here would be, if you're working on something that you don't understand, don't pretend that you do, because it absolutely shows in the writing, absolutely shows. So just ask, and yeah, a lot of people will be able to help, and that's where building a strong network also comes in.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's really insightful. So what's the best piece of advice that you've ever gotten, either career-wise or in publishing? That was a commonly asked question as well.
The
Well,
best piece of
I'll
sorry, Jill, you start. No, you go ahead
well,
and start.
I think Mohamed said part of this already, but people say, well, how do you write books? And one of the most important things that you have to do is you have to start. And I think, Swati, you said that too. You have to start. And I mean, people say, well, Jill, you've written so many books. How do you do it? Well, you do it. I mean, it's so important to start. It is so important to get your ideas down on paper or on the computer or wherever it is. But it's so important just to start, because if you're just carrying it around up here, you actually haven't taken the action to get things happening. And so it really is important that you get your ideas expressed. And Mohamed already said this too. I mean, I've been edited and edited and edited and edited and edited. And, you know, it doesn't even bother me anymore. I mean, I actually look forward to it. What are they going to do? And how are they going to say it? And actually, is it going to be right? Because sometimes you get edited and things that you were trying to say that the actual information gets changed in the course of editing. But you write it down. I was at a panel years ago, and one of the men who was on the panel with me had written a best-selling book and had his 53rd draft. He decided he'd better stop and get it published because he could still continue to change words if he wanted to make sure that it was absolutely positively perfect, whatever that means, because it was only for him. And so you really have to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are two pieces of advice that I have received over my career. One very early on from my first boss at Oxford University Press, and one very recently from an institute director in India. So it's like a president of an institute in India. So I'll start with the first piece, which was my first boss. He said, never say no to anything, especially when you're starting out. That's how you learn. And as I said, it's a very complicated industry, a very complicated field. It's probably the only industry I know of that that provides both product and services to the same audience, and gets the product is created out of the service. So we offer a service of publishing to authors like Jill, and then a product or a book is created from that, and it is different from the fiction publishing industry, because the fiction and non-fiction, the general books, are sold to a wide variety of readers. However, here we are publishing scientific content which is sold back all to the community that creates it, right? So it's scientists and engineers and professionals working in the same field that buy back our products. So it's very complex, it's very interesting. So learning things early on, and I think this would apply in any career, learning things early on, learning how different divisions work in any organization. Even if you end up working for Google or Tesla, I think it helps. So not saying no and trying to learn what the others do, not just saying that that's not my job, I'm not bothered about it. So that was a very good piece of advice, which I got in my first week at OUP, and it's really served me well. And the most recent piece of advice was earlier this year in the spring, when I was talking to one of my longtime friends and mentors, who happens to be the director of one of the Indian Institutes of Technology. And he said, don't hold grudges, especially as once you get into a position of leadership, don't hold grudges with people who sort of oppose you, people who are part of the group, or people who have opposed you in the past, and now you are supposed to lead them. So don't hold grudges with those people. And those are the two essential pieces of advice which I think are really helpful have been really helpful in my career.
Yeah, I would say if you know you're going to be speaking with somebody or might run into somebody at a conference or an event, it's always good, and it's someone you want to speak with or that you're going to be interviewing, it's always good to do a little research first, just so you know something about them that you can bring into the conversation, or something you have in common. And also write everything down, because when I go to conferences, I talk to so many people, and when it's fresh in your mind, you're excited about something, but then you forget because you've talked to 25 people. So I make little notes on the back of business cards if I talk to someone, or in a little notebook, because I don't have a young, fresh brain anymore and things fall out. So that's what I think is good advice. And also publishing is academic publishing is a small industry, and almost everyone I know in publishing has worked for another major competitor, and so it's good not just to not hold grudges, but not burn bridges, because your assistant might be your boss one day. So
I think.
Go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Natalie.
I would just like to say, be yourself. And that's how you really can progress. Be yourself, and if you don't have a PhD like me, don't pretend that you have a PhD. Be honest, and people will appreciate that. Even editors-in-chief or scientists that you talk to, if they ask you for your background and you say, well, I don't have a PhD, but I studied something else, they will only appreciate it if you are honest with them. And they are really, really happy to explain you what they are investigating, what the research is about. And at the end of such a conversation, you will know more about the subject and you will have a real friend, because they really appreciate it that you are honest, that you are yourself. And yeah, there's something else. I've always said that I work with my heart. And I think in publishing, you really can work with your heart. You can put all the, everything you like, you can put that in your product. As I told you before, I used to publish books as well. And I always said my books are my babies, because it's a process. You talk to a professor about his or her proposal, then you get the proposal, you have it reviewed, you get the manuscript, and then the book comes out. So it's like a baby that is born. And I've always treated my books as babies. And I've taken care of that the marketing was done for these books. I promoted it on social media. And I think authors do really appreciate that. And when you're really interested in what they are doing and what they are writing, and just be yourself. That's my main advice.
Yeah, I have authors that I worked with at other companies 10, 15 years ago that I'm still friends with, and we keep in touch. And that's the hardest part about changing the job, is losing all those author connections, because you do have this rapport and these like babies that have been created together. And
I want to ask a specific question related to the events of this year. How has the pandemic affected the publication of scientific work? Have you seen any changes in publishing trends or demand or anything of that nature?
So I can answer this question from the book's perspective, and maybe Natalie can do that from the journal's perspective, although I have a vision of what's happening. So in terms of the books, it depends on the discipline. As we all know, everything has been affected. Funding has been affected as well. While I did not see much of an impact in my field, like we probably ended up publishing more books than ever this year. And Mary works also in our group, so she will probably second that. But I know there were other fields that were affected. People, could not go into work. They could not complete what they needed to. So there were some slowdowns in terms of book publishing in some areas. And in terms of research, of course, that's been impacted. I'm sure you're all very aware of it. Some people in the world are still not able to access their labs. In some places, there is no funding available anymore due to the slowdown in the economies. So it has definitely affected research. And in terms of demand, it's sort of switched, especially with regards to books. Journals were primarily accessed electronically anyway, but the way our books were read was almost 50-50, electronic and print. And we have seen a huge shift towards the electronic side. There has been a huge demand for accessibility of content outside the institute, so remote accessing of content that libraries subscribe to. So there were some hurdles and some changes, but overall, I think this year has accelerated what was already happening in the publishing industry and in the education industry. So a huge push towards electronic and electronic reading and digital learning. So I think Jill might second me on that with her experience.
Well, from what's happening on my end as a series editor, I mean, Mary will back me up on this as well. We've had 4 books published this year. That's more books than have been published in any year of the series so far. And we have more books under contract that are moving forward. Actually, I wrote a book. I updated an unpublished manuscript, and it's already published. It was published in August, and I thought about it. I remembered it in late February. I submitted the proposal in March. I started working on it in March, got approval. The manuscript was submitted in May. What else was I going to do? I was writing books during the lockdown. and then it was published in August. So, I mean, for me, it's been a very productive year in terms of writing and in terms of recruiting of editors, volume editors for the series.
Yeah, I would say that it's if this had happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it would have been a very different situation because we did mostly print and we would have like warehouses full of books. And if those can't go out to people, there goes like the profit margin. But this year, and now we've moved to doing print on demand. So someone buys something, we print it. So we don't have to pay for all that warehouse space. Plus what Swati said, with Springer Link and ebooks, it hasn't really made that big a dent for us, which is great. That I know if for other types of books, for more consumer books, trade books, it's very different. They do a lot of print still. So we're in a good space here though.
Yeah, great. As for journals, we have published a lot more this year because people had the time to write and submit articles. And depending on the discipline, we are seeing now some delays because for some disciplines, maybe more experiments are requested in the revision stage. And of course, if people can't access the lab, they cannot do these experiments. So we are now seeing some delays in some disciplines, but of course, this doesn't apply to all disciplines. But in general, we have published more because people had time to publish. They had time to write.
One thing that has been seriously affected this year, if you see behind me, is my collection of conference name tags. I could not attend any conferences in person. So,
Yeah.
so we are, to be on a serious note, we are missing the engagement with our community, which we were able to do with conference and campus travel. And hopefully
I've been doing a lot of things kind of like this, but specifically about book publishing to various like engineering societies or universities. So it's like a campus visit without going anywhere. So.
Right.
One thing I can add to that, for at least or for magazines or for science journalism, I personally feel that in a way we have been training all our lives for this. It's the year when science journalism has become of paramount importance. It's really the most important year where we need to better communicate science. There's so much misinformation out there, and our role became strikingly important all of a sudden. That's why I mean, everything we've been, I always think that everything we've been doing so far has been leading up to this. So at this critical time, we're able to counter all that misinformation and actually be able to provide this really important service to all those people all of a sudden all around the world who are every single person wants to know as much as possible about this virus and about this pandemic and how to deal with it and the status of vaccines and should they take vaccines and what's going to happen in the future, social distancing, masks and everything. And it all falls down to science journalists to be able to communicate that effectively, because otherwise it's taken up by politicians and that just messes things up. That ruins everything. And that's why it's become so important for science journalists to be able to be part of this conversation and fight to be part of this conversation and fight to have more pages in magazines or newspapers, mainstream media or whatever, so that you can offer that to people.
Yeah, and Springer had earlier this year made a lot of content available for free for for COVID, anything related to viruses across disciplines, not just in medicine. Plus, then there was a campaign for women in engineering. There was a campaign for Black Lives Matter, where a lot of social science and was made available for free for a limited time. So we're trying to help kind of in that way and doing more open access too, which is something that's been trending up and up and up over the last few years, and that's getting more recognized these days.
We also had about 550 textbooks available for free downloads for some time this year. Finally, we had to stop making them free because of the high load on the servers.
Yeah, I had one book that got 10 million views
Oh my God.
in a couple of months.
Wow. Great. So at this time, I know we don't have too much time left, unfortunately, but I'd like to make the webinar open for questions. If any of the attendees have questions, I'm not sure if you're able to manually unmute them.
Yeah, I can unmute everyone, but if you're not asking a question, please mute yourself so there is no background noise. Okay, I've unmuted No, I don't think that worked.
Maybe we could put comments in the chat box.
Yeah, there is a questions box, so you can ask questions, or if you, I'm not sure why I'm not able to unmute people. Okay, so if you could post your questions in the chat box.
If not, I've had two questions for specific panelists, if we'd like to go from there.
And I will put up the panelist names.
Yeah.
Great. So for, oh, I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Jill, if you are. Oh, okay.
Oh, I think we all got I got muted for some reason, so.
Jill is unmuted.
Oh.
Jill, we can't hear you again.
Either way, I have a question for Mary, if you'd like to go from there.
Okay.
So one of the questions was, what do you do at the conferences that you travel to? Or I'm sure also other people, if you'd like to answer this question, you're free to as well. But
it would depend on the size of the conference. We have sponsored ones where we get a big booth with a ton of books. And so I'm usually at the booth. People come by and ask questions. If a new book is published, we'll have that. We might do a little mini launch for it at the booth. We also have journals there. Sometimes a journal editor will also be there. Sometimes I do talks on book publishing as like a mini session if they let me. And I talk to potential new authors. Sometimes I'll go through the speaker list and pick people that I think might make good authors, and I'll email them ahead of time and try to set up meetings. I go to some smaller conferences where it might just be a little table with books. Those are a little more intimate. I might be the only exhibitor at some of those, so it's a little more flexible with my time, so I can set up more meetings. I go to some sessions. They're very academic, and since I'm not an expert, I might go if I want to like talk to the speaker afterwards. I can kind of pin them right after they're done speaking. I can go up and talk to them. And sometimes we'll have dinner with people, set up lunch meetings. Sometimes there's events, you go and schmooze. If it's in an area where there might be a good campus visit, I'll try to set that up, depending on the country and the region. So that's from the book's perspective, that's what I do. Maybe someone wants to talk about journals.
Yeah, sure. Normally at a conference, we hold the board meetings for our journals. Normally these are organized during a lunch or during dinner. So we have lunch or dinner and we hold the board meeting. We are also at the booth, and sometimes I do go to the sessions, but not always, because yeah, most people know where to find us at the booth. And yeah, often I make appointments in advance so that people know that we are there, and then they drop by. And as you know, I've been with the company for 20 years, so yeah, people really do want to speak to you if they have an idea or something that they would like to discuss, a new article or maybe a special issue for a journal. And yeah, I also try to combine it with either a campus visit where I give an author workshop, or I give an author workshop at the conference as well. So it's pretty similar to what the book editors are doing, actually.
So then my next question is for Jill. What are the biggest difficulties that you run into when trying to acquire and publish information about women in STEM, historical women, or women-specific issues?
Interesting thing is that I would say it's really evolved over time. In 1987, when I started researching historical women in science, technology, engineering, and math and STEM, there was very little information available. But over time, many more books have been published, many more articles have been written, a lot of work has been done in the field. I've done a lot of work in the field, published on that as well. And so I would say today, I don't see difficulties in either getting the information, although the hardest part is figuring out who the women are. Once you know who they are, you can find the information on them. And I'm actually really indebted to Springer for the Springer Women in Engineering and Science series, that they've published so far in the series, 2 of which are more about historical development of engineering and science and the women in the field. But all of the other volumes are actually on a technical topic within the fields of science and engineering. And so it's been really a pleasure to work with them. And I would say at this point, I don't see that there are problems with regard to getting and publishing information about women worldwide in STEM. I am working on other books to uncover historical women across all fields of endeavor by country, and getting that information actually is very difficult. So, but the women in STEM is getting easier and easier.
That's great.
Wonderful. So I'd like to open, if there's anyone who'd like to ask any questions in the chat, now is your chance.
Okay, there is a question here. Can you speak to the collaborative aspect of your job a little more versus collaborative among other editors, scientists, authors, etc.? How extensive is that communication back and forth? Okay, this is interesting. So I'll start with my perspective. There is a lot of collaboration and a lot of communication. So like Mary said and Amin said, we collaborate with peer reviewers, authors all the time. And I think Mary also jokingly mentioned that a lot of what we do is send emails and read emails. So there is a lot of communication back and forth, and also amongst each other. For example, even though now we have 2 different groups working on journals and books, there is still a lot of collaboration between, for example, Natalie's group and my group, or even Mary and other colleagues around the world. So it's very, very collaborative, or even different colleagues from different parts of the business, such as magazines. And to give you an example, if you noticed about 30 minutes ago, I had to turn off my camera for 2 minutes. That was because an author from Tokyo was texting me, and it was pretty late in Tokyo, so I had to respond to him. So that's pretty much what we do. So it is extensive collaboration and communication with colleagues and external partners such as authors, reviewers, and editors. And anyone wants to add to that?
I can briefly add to that from my experience. So the editorial process, it's extremely collaborative, like I said, because the editors work very closely with the writer or the journalist. There's a lot of back and forth here, and sometimes it can be tricky because, like I said, it's a bit of a touchy issue when you're a writer and you see how much your work has changed, or you might not feel very happy about some of those changes. So that communication needs to be very clear and very very precise, I'd say. But then it also involves a lot of people coming together. So a story, I mean, you've got a writer, but then you've got an art team, and you need to communicate with the art team as well. If you need, for example, some imagery or some infographics drawn, or some image that's actually prepared, or it can be very tricky. I find that very challenging when I have an idea in my mind and I need to communicate that to an artist. And that's one of the things that might have a lot of back and forth, where they produce something and I go like, you know what, maybe we need to change these bits, and it becomes quite a different experience when you're working across global teams, which is what a lot of us here in Springer Nature do. But then when we're also all mostly have been working this year from home as well, so you need to do that by camera instead of where I would just walk over to my colleague's desk and we sit at their computer and do that. Now we actually have to do that by camera or email or on the phone. So it does get a bit tricky. But then, like I said, I mean, the story that you see in a magazine at the end, I mean, there's a writer, but that's the effort of so many people. You've got artists involved, editors, sub-editors, copy editors, fact checkers. It just, so many people come together to produce that. So it's a very dynamic working environment. And like I said, I mean, I always feel that the cornerstone of that is trust, is really this team trusting each other that they're all producing the best version of that story that they can get.
Great, that was really insightful. Thank you. Are there any more questions? I'm not able to see them.
I can see it, but there are no more questions in the questions box. So if anyone else wants to ask a question, you would see a question mark on your screen. I think you have to click on it and then you can enter a question. Okay, there is one more question. Have you had any fun travel or global experiences or insights as a result of your job?
I would say yes. We've been very lucky to be able to travel really all over the world, and either whether it's meeting with other colleagues or just going to, I went to Australia, to China, to Abu Dhabi, and just being able to take, getting to know that there's usually some kind of cultural event if you're, for people, so getting to know just more about the place you are, taking a couple of days to be able to travel around, if you can, which I like, which I've fortunately been able to do. And then just meeting the scientists, and it's so fascinating, the work that they're doing. And so that's really the best part of my job, I think, is just the meeting people and the travel. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's all stopped this year, but in the last 6 years, I've got some great memories.
Yeah, I would also like to add something to that, because we are based in the Netherlands, and when we travel somewhere, we have to go to Amsterdam, and the airport of Amsterdam is a real hub. So if I go to a conference, let's say in Tokyo, there's people from Italy, from Spain, from Germany on the plane from Amsterdam to Tokyo. So half of the plane is full with people that go to the conference, and we're already having fun in the plane. So and we're even doing business in the plane. So it is really nice. It is really nice. And as Mary said, normally there is a social event at the conference, and yeah, you're able to see something of the culture of the country that you're visiting. yeah, I've had lunch with Mary James in New York, and I've had dinner with Swati in Chennai, and it's really nice to get to know new cultures because of your job.
Yeah, and I had a dinner once with scientists from, like, it's like politics all falls away. Like, it was a dinner with people from Israel, Iran, Russia, the US, some other countries that just like, you hear so much in the news about all the strife and everything, and it was just, everyone was just laughing and enjoying themselves, and I love that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I will speak from the experience of one of my editors who once had dinner with a gentleman who he, at the end of the dinner, realized was married to Angela Merkel.
oh wow.
Yeah, so the German chancellor's husband is a professor. So this was and he's somebody many of us have met over the years. But this was like a interesting incident where this person was eating dinner with someone else at the conference and ended up having dinner with the German chancellor's husband. And as Mary said also, and Natalie, we get exposed to a lot of cultures. I think I went to 10 new countries just last year for conferences. I mean, I ended up in Iceland for a conference. I don't know if I would have made a plan to travel to Iceland ever
Yeah,
otherwise.
that's how I plan my travel for the year now, rather than having to pick and choose like vacation plates. I'll just say what conferences are coming up. And they usually are in very interesting places, because the more interesting the place, the more people I think they'll get to attend them. So yeah, that's
Yeah, I already regret not going with Mary to a conference she invited me to join her at in Hawaii. That would have been my 38th state last year.
yeah, that was the last conference I went to. We went zip lining, which was fun.
That's awesome. So, where? Oh, I'm sorry if you would like to add something.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you guys if any attendees or anyone would like to reach out to you, have maybe more of a personal network. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
I should have put email addresses on this slide. How about I'll email that to you, Yael, and if everyone's okay with it, I'll provide everyone's email and contact information after the call.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
I can also send a link to that mentoring program that I mentioned, because that seems like a good organization, and it's all STEM related.
Great, that would be wonderful. I know we have a lot of people in the club who are really interested in this field and would really benefit from any resources you could lend them. So thank you very much.
Sure. All right. Anything else?
I just want to thank you guys so much. I wish I could turn my camera on, but
Yeah,
I really,
sorry.
yeah, I really thank you guys for taking the time to spend it with our club. I know that what you've said today has been really invaluable for us. I know there are a lot of people here who are really passionate about science journalism and who are looking for to take their next steps in their career in this direction. So I thank you again.
Yeah, well, all the best to you guys, and yeah, reach out anytime.
Yeah, great. Thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Best.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.